You feel it before you hear it, the hush that drapes itself over the pews like incense settling in mid-air. A single treble voice climbs upward, a silver thread weaving through stone arches older than any living witness. Majesty meets fragility, and you lean in, waiting for the chord that always follows. But it never comes. Instead, the song snaps, the thread breaks, and a boy's body crumples to the marble. Your breath catches. Is this an accident, or has the hymn itself been silenced by something darker? Seconds pass that feel like centuries. You register the collective gasp, the flutter of cassocks, the scraping of oak benches as choristers scatter. Somewhere to your right, a woman stifles a scream. To your left, the organist's hands hover over the keys, frozen. You can almost taste the copper sharpness of fear blooming in the nave. A cathedral is meant to cradle the faithful, yet in this moment it seems to exhale dread. You rise, compelled by duty and something deeper, the persistent curiosity of a poet who finds truth in echoes. You are Nathaniel Quinn, investigator by profession, poet by compulsion. The dean summoned you for your discretion, but also for your ear. An ear attuned to cadence, resonance, the linguistic fingerprints that murder leaves behind. Tonight, the cathedral is your stage, and the choir your cast, though one of them now lies motionless beneath a stained glass window depicting the resurrection. Ironic, isn't it? A death scene framed by eternal life. You edge closer, noting the spilled hymn book, the limp white surplice, the unnatural twist of the boy's neck. Was it poison, a concealed blade, or something invisible, as intangible as sound waves? The medical team arrives, but you are already collecting impressions. You catalogue voices, the choirmaster's startled vibrato, the basso boom of the verger barking orders, the brittle whisper of the dean pleading for calm. People reveal themselves first through tone, then through words. As they usher the congregation out, you stay behind, a lone figure amid flickering candles. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon flutters, perhaps protesting the intrusion. You look up. That flutter matters. Every sound tonight may become evidence. Morning light finds you in the chapter house opposite a semicircle of clergy whose collars gleam like polished bone. Hierarchy here is not merely tradition. It is motive, opportunity, alibi. You address them in your quiet way, inviting confidence rather than demanding it. You ask what seems obvious, who stood closest, who rehearsed the anthem, but you also ask what slips under the vestments, who resented the soloist, who feared being replaced. Smiles tighten, eyes narrow. Power hums beneath courtesy like a muted organ note. Later, you stand in the choir stalls tracing the geometry of sound. The cathedral architect designed these stones to sing. Strike one wall, and a shimmer of resonance travels the length of the nave before folding back upon itself. A note, once released, never truly dies. It only decays into silence. You speak aloud a single line of verse, listening for its return. Where does it fade? Where does it linger? The answer may map the path of a poisoned whisper or the arc of a hurled object. How often does murder rely on acoustics? More often than you'd think. You summon the choir, minus their fallen companion, for a new rehearsal under your watch. Their voices tremble, but slowly confidence returns, like light through dust. You notice fluctuations. The altos drag the tempo when the choirmaster steps away. The tenors sharpen whenever the assistant organist raises his brows. Power games play out in half notes and glances. You cut them off mid-psalm. A question hangs. Who benefits from a broken harmony? No one answers, yet everyone does. You feel it in the collective intake of breath. That night you walk the cloisters with the precentor, a man whose measured footsteps echo authority. Stone arches frame moonlit courtyards, and the silence is punctuated only by the drip of rainwater. You steer the conversation from theology to ambition. Did the deceased threaten anyone's assent? The precentor pauses, clasping hands behind his back. His eyes flick toward the bell tower, where promotion waits like a throne. Rank in the ecclesiastical order is coveted, perhaps enough to justify sin. He sighs, offers a platitude, then retreats into shadow. You note the avoidance, the subtle acceleration of his stride, the tremor at the word successor. You return to the scene with a forensic acoustician, an old friend who owes you favors. You clap once, sharply. He records the reverberation tail, then overlays it with recordings from evensong. An anomaly emerges. A faint secondary echo just before the choristers collapse, as if a small, hard object struck stone. A vial, a pellet. Sound leaves signatures. Stone keeps secrets until asked politely. Your friend isolates the frequency. You follow it like Ariadne tracing thread through labyrinth corridors until it leads to a tiny ledge behind the rood screen. There, you find a glass ampule shattered into powder. In the cloister garden the next morning, you interview the choir boys, careful to lower yourself to their eye level. Children remember details adults dismiss. One boy recalls seeing the assistant organist press something into the soloist's hand. A lozenge, perhaps. Another mentions the choirmaster's fury earlier that week when the dean suggested retiring him. A third admits he overheard the precentor rehearsing a sermon on humility that dripped with anything but. Rivalries bloom early in sacred soil. The autopsy arrives. The chorister died of aconite, a toxin that numbs the heart as brutally as a dagger might pierce it. Ingestion could have been disguised as a soothing pastille for a sore throat. You picture the glass ampule, the assistant organist's nervous glances. Yet guilt rarely sings in a single voice. It prefers counterpoint. You broaden your score. Evening cloaks the cathedral in violet when you confront the assistant organist at the console. You speak softly, invoking music instead of murder. You ask him to play the opening bars of the Magnificat. He does, and his hands tremble. You ask why his dynamic markings emphasize fortissimo where the composer wrote piano. Tears fall onto ivory keys. He admits slipping the boy a throat-soothing pellet, but not poison. He only wanted the solo to shine. His motive is vanity, not violence. Still, you keep him within reach of the law. You pivot to the choirmaster, cornering him in the vestry among copes and cassocks rich with incense. He blusters about discipline, tradition, excellence. Yet, when you suggest the dean planned his early retirement to welcome a younger, more modern director, perhaps the deceased boy's uncle, his face whitens like candle drippings. Did the choirmaster fear obscurity enough to murder? He sputters, denies, then rails at the unfairness of a world that discards craft for novelty. You leave him shaking, absorbed by his own echo of rage, and still the melody eludes you until you revisit the acoustics. You sit alone at midnight, silent except for the ticking of an old brass clock. You close your eyes and replay the service in memory, note by note, breath by breath. In that mental cathedral, you hear it again, the secondary echo, but this time you sense direction. It did not travel along stone. It ricocheted off glass. You rise and climb the narrow spiral to the triforium, where stained windows glow with moonlit blues. One pane bears a fine, fresh crack, shaped like a miniature lightning bolt. Who stood there during evensong? Only clergy carry keys to that passage. The precentor. You find him in his study composing tomorrow's prayers. Your entrance startles him into dropping a crystal decanter. Shards scatter like dissonant notes. You speak calmly, telling him what the stone told you. He protests, but his voice wavers an octave higher than earlier. You mention the homily on humility, the coveted promotion, the glass ampule traced to the cathedral infirmary, where he orders medicinal supplies. His shoulders sag. He asks if confession still counts when offered to a poet. Words tumble from him like a faltering chant. Ambition, frustration, a fleeting decision as the hymn soared. He only intended to frighten the boy into missing the high C, sabotaging the choir and discrediting the choir master, thus accelerating retirement, thus opening a vacancy he could fill. He chose aconite for its bitter taste masked by honey. He never expected death to be so swift. The moment the boy fell, the precentor felt the cathedral walls close in, yet pride sealed his tongue, until now. You escort him through the cloisters, where the night air smells of wet stone and rosemary. He asks if the cathedral will ever welcome his voice again. You answer with a question of your own. Does any song survive when its singer forgets the difference between glory and grace? He weeps. Somewhere above, the bell tolls compline, the hour of forgiveness and final things. The next day, the choir sings evensong once more, a requiem for their lost soprano and for ambitions gone astray. You stand in a shadowed transept, listening. The chord that broke now resolves, not perfectly, but honestly. And you realize that cathedrals, like people, are built to carry both beauty and fault, resonance and silence. You turn toward the great door, poem already forming in your mind, a canticle for a silent choir that will echo far beyond these stones. Take this with you. Harmony is a choice renewed with every breath, and the most enduring music is the kind that leaves room for mercy.